So I just wanted to kind of go over some of the things with designing a hood this way. So here's the main body of the hood when it's closed, and this is the piece that swings open like this. This distance right here, when you're making an angle, sometimes can be significant. As you can see with this piece of wood that I've cut, making the angle, you can see this distance, but as you make the angle larger, then that becomes a larger distance. Then that's going to be more height above the hood. Just made a quick tank rim replica just out of 2x4s, and I cut it to the same width as my top trim of my tank. So it's the same dimensions, and then I can just build it on top of this, and I know that it'll fit properly. Now here I'm just going to kind of explain why I've done this sort of rabbet design versus what you'd see on most cabinet doors. So this is a leftover piece of my cabinet doors. Now there's the channel there. So just cutting the rabbet like I've done here, it is a lot less work. We'll see how well it works. I'm going to be gluing actually to the plywood itself, and I don't think you get too much expansion contraction with the centerpiece. So just kind of mocked up that back panel. And then down here, without doing full rails and stiles and just rabbeting these kind of mock doors, this is kind of what you run into, is just having that gap there. This is kind of how they'll be viewed, so it's mostly hidden. So this is going to be the front door panel. So these end pieces are actually, this is also something you wouldn't normally do, is put that long piece on the end like that. In this case, it's giving me what I want. Just doing it this way puts the gaps on the bottom, and then it's fine that way. Now the one on the top has an extra rabbet because the top panel is going to go like that. It's easier to sand the panels when they're not in the rails and stiles, because you can't really get that sander right up in the corner there too well, and it just kind of sands unevenly. So if you just take a few seconds beforehand, just sand your panels before, then it's less work. Almost through the glue up of this panel. This is one of the side panels. So now I'm just doing some test fitting and, put the sides up, and it's all looking good. And I'm almost ready to start gluing on this piece, and then, a screw up. I cut these two pieces too short, and I even cut this piece too short. So here I'm just kind of showing how I fixed this, just cutting that long piece in diagonal and then gluing it. It actually is a pretty good method. If you're covering it with paint, then you can hardly tell. Now some of these mistakes can be avoided if you're using a plan or software, but not all of them. There's still going to be the odd time that you're going to mess up and have to fix it. So to do this angle cut, if I had a miter saw here, I'd probably just use that, but I don't, so I've had to sort of make this temporary, it's similar to like a taper jig, so just got a guide rail on the bottom, and then I've recessed these holes for hold down clamps. So unless you had like a really big miter saw, this would probably be the preferred method. It was really easy to line up, and it made a clean cut. So the piece we're looking at now is the side front pieces, And I made these pieces here, just temporarily screwed on there. Now these aren't that important, but they do prevent light from spilling out, and then that kind of helps to hide that, you know, just kind of strange diagonal line in your cabinet. So I've also installed these small wood blocks just to hide, you know, just to make that a flush edge. So doing another test fit here, put the back panel and the side panel together. So back here you can also see I'm going to be using one of these insert nuts, and then the bolt will go through. That'll just allow this back panel to be removable. There's going to be some fans and cords need to go there, and I need a little cutout here for my return line. So just doing another test fit, cut out some reliefs for cords, and that's the return line right there. Okay, so moved on to the last piece of construction, which is the top panel. Here I'm just prepping the install of this crossbar, and that's just a piece of maple that I've cut. It's going to be fairly rigid, and that'll just prevent too much sagging of the top panel plywood. So here I'm just cutting the 2 large holes for the top rear panel. Just been using this piece of steel as a straight edge, and then connecting those corners. And I've just got a little 1/4 inch straight bit on there. Now the rest of the hood is coming together. I've finished the top piece. I had thought that I was going to glue that on there, but I actually think I'm just going to screw it from the top into this cross piece. And then I also had another issue with my rough cut turned out to be a little bit too short, so this kind of just is what happens when you don't use a plan, and it's not really a big deal. I'm just going to screw it down, and then I'll be adding a strip of wood there. No big deal. Okay, so this stage has been just for the alignment of that piano hinge or continuous hinge that I've been using on the top here. So I've just had to make sure that the cabinet is as squared up as possible and lined up, and then I've just been using those clamps to kind of sandwich the wood together, the 2 halves, and now I just have to screw it down. So one little trick I've learned was to use playing cards just to use as shims, and that can really help you out for spacing stuff out perfectly. Here's just a couple shots from the painting and sanding stages. So just kind of went over any of the marks that were left over from the router. Anytime you want to mount a fan to something rigid, and that's a moving part, and you always want to take the time to put some washers. Here I've got some just silicone washers, just allowing it a little bit of room to wiggle, and that just keeps your rattles down, your noise down. Here I'm just using the heat gun to work with this ABS plastic. I just created some small deflectors to force the air inside of the hood from these fans. Here we are at the final product. So just looking at the back side here, you can see I mounted plastic grate underneath. I've got the fans wired up. I finished these little deflectors. So here I've just kind of used some Velcro, and then here's something I didn't really video, but it's this little door here. And that just allows me to feed the tank without having to open up the big front all the time. I don't have any footage of actually painting the hood. It's pretty much just latex paint. It's a gray color, almost black, and then some water-based poly. And that just allows for easy cleaning, and it doesn't look too bad. And on the inside of the hood, I also used water-based latex paint, and then used some silicone on the inside corners. I'll be posting a part 2 of this video where I go over what worked well and what I'd do differently the next time. Thanks.